Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I just wanted to talk to you guys about legs. Because there's a lot to them. And just kind of give you guys an idea of what I do and what works for me, and maybe it'll help you and work for you as well. So I train legs 3 times a week. I train quads on Monday, and then glutes and hamstrings on Thursday, and then again glutes and hamstrings on Saturday. And the reason I do this is so that that I know that I'm actually building those muscles, and I kind of can control what muscle I am working. And there are things that you can do to either focus on your quads, or if you want to focus more on your glutes and hamstrings. What you do and how you train is going to determine what muscles you are working. So it is very important. So starting with quads, what I like to do and what works for me when it comes to working my quads is I like to have my weight in front of me, like front squats. That helps put emphasis more on the quads. Then if I elevate my heels, that's going to put even more emphasis on my quads. When I do, now I'm not very good, my hips are very tight and they do not like to move if my feet are in a forward position, narrow squat. Just my range of motion, it just isn't there. And all my weight wants to roll into the balls of my heels rather than keeping that weight in your heels, which is very, 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 very important when you're working legs. Whether you're squatting, deadlifting, leg pressing, you want to keep your weight in your heels and not rolling to the balls of your feet. So putting the weight in front of me, elevating my heels, and doing more of a plie position, so having my toes slightly pointed out and my heels closer together, I feel more of my quads being worked. You can also elevate your heels, have them, your feet pointing forward, and you will still feel it in your quads. So as far as squats go, that is how I like to squat when I am working my quads. And I've shown a bunch of different variations of how I like to do that on my Instagram, which I will show you in this video as well. Another thing when working the quads, or the legs in general, depending on when it comes to lunges, how wide your lunges or how narrow your lunges is going to determine whether you are working more of your quad muscles than your glutes or your hamstrings. So if I am doing lunges and it is my quad day, I'm going to keep my stance narrow, still making sure my knee isn't going over my toe and that my weight is in the heels of my feet and not the balls of my feet. I will do a narrow lunge. Went blank. So whether it's stationary or front lunges or reverse lunges or anything, I keep my legs more narrow, and that will put more emphasis and focus on those quad muscles. Now, another great exercise to work your quads would be the leg extensions. Those are one of my favorite ways to work my quads. Now, as you probably already know, your quad is made up of 3 different muscles. You've got, I'll show you, you've got your outer quad, your inner, and a quad muscle that runs right down the front. And depending on your feet placement, whether it's squat or like leg extensions like I like to do, depending on your feet placement, is going to determine which one of those quad muscles you are actually working more. So when it comes to leg extensions, I like to do a lot, and I like to switch up my feet placement so that I know that I am targeting all of those quad muscles. Another thing is when you're working, whether it's your legs or your arms, there's usually always one that is working harder than the other. So another thing I like to do is break it up and do single legs so that I know each of those legs are being equally worked. So I'll do a few single leg, then I will do both legs with my feet, my toes pointed towards the ceiling and straight ahead, if that makes sense. And I will do leg extensions that way. Then I will turn my toes inward and do leg extensions with my toes pointed inward, like in a pigeon position. And then I will immediately point my toes outward and have my heels close together and do leg extensions that way, so that I know all of those quad muscles are being worked. Leg presses, when it comes to leg press, feet placement is going to play a big part on whether you are focusing more on your quads or on your glutes and hamstring. So I like for quads to bring my feet down to the very bottom of the leg press, and I like to turn my feet out, and I will switch these up so that I'm working all of those quad muscles. So I'll do some where my feet are pointed, my toes are pointed out, and do leg press, again keeping my feet at the bottom of the leg press. The higher you go, the more it's going to be in your glutes and your hamstrings. So I'll do some this way, some with my feet straight, and some with them pointed in. Now sometimes doing them with my toes pointed inward, it kind of hurts my knees, because you want to keep you don't want to let your knees cave in, you want to keep your knees pressing out, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And that is going to put more emphasis on my quads. Another thing I like to do, whether it's quads, glutes, hamstrings, is I also like to do pulses. So if I'm doing my plie squats, not necessarily, I don't think I would do it in a front squat, but if I'm doing it like at the Smith machine, where I have a little more stability, I like to just do pulses. So you're kind of doing half range of motion. You're not locking out your knees, and you're not going super low, so that you keep all of that tension in your quads. So I like to do that with the plie squats on the Smith machine, or like when I do leg presses, I'll do my full range of motion, and then I'll kind of just pulse, burns like a mother, as many as I can, in each of those different positions. Another thing that works the quad muscles are called sissy squats. Now a lot of gyms don't have a sissy squat. It's where there's like a bar or a pad that goes behind your knee, like below your knee, and you squat straight down and up, kind of leaning more back. That puts a lot of emphasis on your quads, which I do a different variation of sissy squats at the Smith machine, using a rope and going up on my toes and leaning back and just squatting that way, which I will show some footage of how I do that at the end of this video so that you have an idea. So those are my favorite quad exercises that place more focus on your quads rather than your glutes and your hamstrings. So the front squats, whether it's narrow stance, which I can't do very well, plie, keep those heels elevated. Now back to the knees caving in when doing squats, leg press, deadlifts, when you are performing these exercises, you want to make sure your knees are not caving in, that you're keeping them pressed out. This will also help when you're squatting. You'll be able to squat more weight if you focus on pushing your knees out and pressing your like hips forward. So you're kind of just push them out instead of letting them cave in, because your knees cave in, your back goes, and your form just goes to pow. So that's why it's also, if you're struggling with your knees caving in when you're squatting, deadlifting, leg pressing, put a band. You can put a band around your leg so that you are having to push out on the band, and that'll help you remember, don't let those knees cave. No, no, no. So those are my favorites for quads. The squats, front squats, heels elevated, like I already said. Narrow lunges so that your feet aren't too wide, otherwise that's gonna work your glutes and your hamstrings. We want to, in the quads, then narrow. Leg extensions with the different feet placement, as well as leg presses with the different feet placements. Those are always my go-tos when it comes to your quads. Now, a lot of these exercises like squats, leg press, what else, like step ups, a lot of these exercises that you do, they're gonna work everything, but doing little changes can make all the difference in whether you're wanting to work more your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings. So those are my favorite for quads. And then for glutes and hamstrings, I usually just work them together, because a lot of them, I feel, a lot of the exercises I feel both in my hamstrings as well as my glutes. There are certain exercises that are just solely your glutes. And another thing, if you really want to focus on your glutes and building those glute muscles, it's very important that you do the glute activation. It makes such a difference. It really gets those glute muscles fired up and ready to work. It wakens those sleepy muscles. For me, what I have found to work. Now, when it comes to activating your glutes and doing a glute warm-up, I used to just do like so much, and it was so time consuming that I've actually narrowed it down, and I will only do like 3 different glute activating exercises, 10 of each for 3 times through. So I'll do squat pulses with the band around my thighs, just above my knee. I'll do 10 of those, go right into like, I'll just be standing and do like a kickback with the band, 10 each leg, go into a lying hip thruster with the band and push my hips out, 10 of those, and then I'll repeat that 3 times. It's not always the same, but it was getting to the point where I was doing too much that I wasn't leaving enough time for my actual exercises, my lifts. So yeah, pick 3 glute activation exercises, do them as many times as you want, from 10 to 20 reps, and just repeat that 3 to 4 times, and that should be good enough for your glute warm-up. For me, what works when I just really want to focus on my glutes, hip thrusts, heavy hip thrusts, even lighter weight and more reps, that burns. And I just feel it mostly in my glutes. Another thing, cable kickbacks or donkey kicks. I'm just solely using that glute muscle and using those for the lifts, because sometimes your hamstrings like to take over in some of the exercises like deadlifts, and I usually feel more hamstring than glute when doing like deadlifts and all of that. So yeah, so heavy hip thrusts, kickbacks of any kind, whether you're doing them at the cable or just with a band or with a dumbbell behind your knee, all of those work excellent to really get those glutes working. And then hip abductors for me, I have shown on my Instagram, my new favorite way to do hip abductors is just with the band. And I sit down and I'll do 20 leaning forward and pushing that booty back, really focusing on the glutes and using that mind to muscle connection. It makes all the difference in the world. So yeah, I'll do 20 leaning forward, sit up straight, do 20 more, and then lean far back and do 20 more. So and that really gets the glutes. So those are a few of my favorite glute exercises. And then for the hamstrings, doing any type of hamstring curl, whether you're lying down, sitting up, using the medicine ball, using a foam roller to do any of those hamstring curls. Those would probably be like my number one to work the hamstrings. Doing deadlifts, I like to do straight leg deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts for the hamstrings, and then also the glutes. And doing single legs so that, again, they're evenly being worked so that one's not working harder than the other, and then that's when muscle imbalances come into play. So yeah, those are like my favorite focused on the hamstring exercises. Again, when it comes to squat, if you're wanting to work more glutes and hamstrings, you'll want to do a back squat. Your feet placement is more wide, so more, for me, I do like to do a sumo stance, wide toes pointed out slightly, and that for me works more my glutes and my hamstrings than my quads. For leg presses, to work more hamstrings and glutes, again, your feet up higher, more wider stance, toes slightly pointed out, and that's going to be more glutes and hamstrings. And some of that inner thigh too. I usually feel my inner thighs when I do a wider stance. And then you've got like your side lunges and step ups. For me, the step up has to be pretty high for me to be working my glutes and my hamstrings. If it's not, if it's just like parallel, that will work more my quad than my glutes and my hamstrings. So doing all those different things, you just have to be aware, using that mind to muscle, and then actually paying attention. Like, am I filling this where I actually want to be filling it? If I'm working on glutes and hamstring and I'm doing a step up and I'm filling it more in my quads, then something needs to be done. I need to switch something up. I need to raise that platform, make it higher. So yeah, I hope all of these give you an idea of what muscles you want to be working, and to make sure you're actually working those muscles, because it makes all the difference in the world. If you're trying to get progress in your quads but you're doing sumo stance squats, your progress might be a little slowed down. So try working on doing a more narrow stance squat. Try working on those front squats. I know a lot of people have a hard time with front squats because it kills. It hurts your wrists, it hurts your collarbones, your shoulder bones. It's uncomfortable. And so I would recommend, if you really want to do front squats, which I totally recommend, just doing a few at a time and building up those muscles, getting used to having your wrist bent back and a heavy bar across the front of you. You will get used to it, but you're not going to if you don't do it consistently. So anyways, I hope this video has helped. I hope it gives you some ideas of what you can do to work your legs better. Be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.